Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott were kicked out of the Liberal Party as a consequence for telling the truth and standing up for the rule of law. In an open letter released after her dismissal, Dr. Philpott stated the following, quote, "Rather than acknowledge the obvious that a range of individuals had inappropriately attempted to pressure the former Attorney General in relation to a prosecutorial decision and apologize for what occurred, a decision was made to attempt to deny the obvious, to attack Jody Wilson-Raybould's credibility and attempt to blame her. I was not able to support the recommended response to deny these allegations." End of quote. Senator Harder, could you tell us how punishing and silencing these two former cabinet ministers is an example of doing politics differently, as Prime Minister Trudeau once promised Canadians?
Senator Harder.
Again, I thank the honourable senator for his question. Let me simply say that the decisions with respect to who is in and who is not in a caucus in the other chamber is for that chamber and their caucus to determine, not for me to comment on.
Here. Senator Smith.
I thank you for your limited response. This government is going through great lengths to try and conceal the details of its attempted interference in a criminal prosecution. La Presse recently reported about access to information requests seeking the clerk of the Privy Council's letters, emails and documents regarding the SNC-Lavalin affair. PCO responded that the ATIP request could not be answered for 240 days or until a month after the next federal election. Senator Harder, we see what's going on here. This type of request should take 30 days, not 240 days. How much further will the government go to hide the truth from Canadians?
Senator Harder.
Again, I thank the honourable senator for his question. Let me remind the chamber that this government has initiated the inquiry by the Ethics Commissioner and Conflict of Interest Commissioner in the other place. That process has the strength of that office, which is independent, which has, as the honourable senator will know, the powers of a superior court judge. And to render findings as he determines them to be. The Prime Minister has also engaged the former Deputy Prime Minister, the former Minister of Justice and the Attorney General to provide advice by the end of June of this year with respect to the relationship between the Attorney General function and Cabinet and the role of staff on both sides. So the government is taking these measures very seriously. It has, as the honourable senator will know, provided comfort to the former Minister and Attorney General to speak and to speak even though she would otherwise be encumbered by her cabinet oath on matters that relate to these series of events. And those hearings have been held and dealt with in the other chamber. So I think it's important to underscore that this government has gone to quite extraordinary lengths to ensure that voice has been given and that the appropriate authorities will have ongoing roles in this matter.
Senator Platt.
Thank you, Speaker. My question as well is for the Leader of the Government in the Senate. Senator Harder, yesterday Senator Smith and I met with you in your office. We had what I thought was a very collegial conversation about moving legislation forward. You were adamant that you were being pressured by Senator Wu and others that you needed to get Bill C-75 and 85 done. Yesterday, your recollection of our agreement on those bills was different than mine. You were of the understanding that I had promised that we would move those bills to committee yesterday. That was not my recollection. But in the interest of good faith, I agreed to try and make this change. And your words to me when I left your office was that if I could make that change, you would not introduce a programming motion. I had never heard of a programming motion. I kept my part of the bargain. You did not. In complete contradiction of your word to me, you tabled a programming motion that is 7 pages long and impacts 11 bills. You had to have had this text prepared and translated in order for it to go yesterday. This did not happen after our conversation. It had to have happened before. Senator Harder, at what point did you decide that you were going to bring in your programming motion regardless of an agreement that you had made?
Senator Harder.
Again, I thank the honourable senator for his question. Without going into all of the details of the conversations I've had over the weeks past with all leaders and with the honourable senator himself, let me simply reiterate that I have, over the last number of weeks, spoken about the need to have a programming approach. Hopefully that we could get an agreement without a formal programming motion needing to be brought forward. But it is my responsibility to prepare for all eventualities, and those preparations have been underway for some time. The dates that I spoke to are the dates that I shared with Senator Smith and other leaders weeks ago, that I shared with all senators at an open Senate meeting let's say 2 weeks ago. It might have been 3, I can't remember. That this ought not to come as a surprise. But what I did say to the honourable senator is that I wouldn't blindside him in the chamber. I would let him know if it was my intention to move forward before we sat. And so at 12:15, after having had consultations with appropriate people, I indicated that I would be moving forward with a motion as I did yesterday.
Senator Platt.
Don, in the spirit of transparency and the commitment I made at our last meeting this morning, I have had further discussions with other leaders and will be proceeding with the programming motion this afternoon after a commitment that I made. Senator Harder, much of what happens in this chamber regarding timelines on legislation is decided by negotiation and, when possible, consensus. It is impossible for this process to work without trust and good faith, which you, Senator Harder, have now broken. Senator, this is not some schoolyard squabble. What you have done impacts the ability to move legislation forward in a manner which respects the traditions, conventions, and values of this chamber. Having broken your word to us on this matter, how am I or any other senator in this chamber supposed to trust your word going forward?
Senator Harder.
Again, I thank my honourable senator friend for his comments. Let me simply say that my obligation is to continue to work with all leaders to seek agreement, to advance legislation, and to ensure the comity of this place to be able to perform its duties. I remain dedicated to that task.
Senator Down.